Now to our speaker, who has been patiently waiting in the wings, the now famous Evan Boldt, superhero. He is the talent sourcing specialist for Peak Performers. His talk is going to be called The Big Jump, Overcoming Career Gaps. Evan is a talent sourcing specialist at Peak Performers, as previously said, a nonprofit staffing agency founded as a nonprofit in 1994 in Austin. Peak Performers is setting a new standard of employment for professionals with disabilities and chronic medical conditions. As a sourcer, he works to find and connect job seekers to available roles through job board postings, messaging, reaching out, tabling at job fairs. He has a bachelor's degree from Missouri State University, a master's degree from the University of Central Arkansas. Please give a warm welcome to Evan Boldt.
Woo woo. Hello, everyone. Greetings. Okay, so as we go through the presentation today, if you all have any questions, feel free to jump in at any time. Let me know what questions you have and would be happy to answer them. But just wanted to take this first little bit, just again to thank Launchpad Job Club, to thank Kathy and Shannon, thank the entire team for having us, for having me, for having Miles, and for letting Pete be here. So with getting everything started, we are Peak Performers. So wanted to first chat just a little bit about Peak. With Peak, just some information for everyone to know. So thank you so much for that intro again, Kathy. A few things to know about Peak Performers are that we have existed for over 28 years. So we have quite a bit of experience, over 850 plus placements last year. The majority of our business, we work with a variety of different roles, but most of the roles that we support are going to be contract roles, helping to support the state of Texas. So working with a variety of agencies for the state of Texas. The roles that we typically fill are going to be administrative in nature, usually things around computers, so everything from administrative assistants to executive assistants. We have data entry operators, we have customer service roles, accounting, finance, a number of engineering roles, IT roles, some scientific roles, and I always like to say that we have a number of niche roles as well that fall under our project specialists, so a little bit of everything. So know that that's kind of the core of our business. As Kathy had mentioned, we are a nonprofit staffing agency. So what we do is we work to help any professionals that have disabilities find jobs. Last year, I believe we had 85% of our workforce that had a disability. We usually shoot for at least 75% of our workforce, but the more, the better. And whenever we talk about disabilities, we talk about anyone that has any disabilities or any long-term or chronic medical conditions. Some of those conditions are apparent, some of them are non-apparent, and it's everything that's really encapsulated in the Americans with Disabilities Act. In fact, the Extended Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the ADAAA. So there are a lot of different conditions that fall under there. In addition to kind of the core of our business supporting the state of Texas, we also have a private sector that helps to support business nationally. So we're in over 19 states, continuing to develop partnerships and try to connect great people with great roles. So that's a little bit about Peak Performers. So the presentation today, the big jump, as I pause, overcoming career gaps. And that's me. So whenever it comes to career gaps, any gaps in your careers, we know that job searches are hard enough as is, whether it's your first job search, whether you've been through a few and you are a little more seasoned. We know that job searches take a lot of time. Don't have to explain that to y'all. But whenever it comes to having gaps in your career, I know that it can make folks feel a specific type of way. You start asking questions as to, well, how are employers going to look at my career gaps? How am I going to talk to folks about it? Maybe I'm feeling self-conscious because something happened. And we know that whenever it comes to gaps in careers, there are all kinds of reasons that folks could have gaps. Whether it's layoffs, we know that layoffs are very salient if we look at today's market. I myself was laid off in, when was it? June, from a role and as a part of the tech layoffs. So I totally understand. So if any of you are there, I'm there with you. We know that illness has been something that's also very salient with folks, whether it's physical, whether it's mental or emotional, whether it's you or family members. We know that that's there. We know that there are also a lot of personal challenges that folks have whenever it comes to just making sure that they're taking care of themselves or their families. So there's a lot of different ways why people might have gaps in their careers. And we know that once you have that gap, then the next challenge is, okay, what are my next steps? I want to rejoin the workforce, whether it's been, a month, a couple of months, whether it's been years. You want to make sure that you are set up for success as you move forward. So that's what this presentation is all about. So there are 7 big points that I want to emphasize today. And I tried to create some alliteration just so that these points are top of mind. And who doesn't like alliteration? So we want to talk about determining the direction of your search, refreshing your resume. We want you to align for your audience. We want you to contact and create connections, your professional network. We also want you to consider contract work, seek out support and resources, and then lastly, to maintain momentum. So the first part is determine the direction of your search. So we know that whenever you have a gap and you're going to be re-entering the workforce, you might be reevaluating everything. You could be just evaluating, what job do I want to apply to? But you might have taken a step back and you're like, well, now I want to reevaluate really my next step. Maybe you've decided to change careers. Maybe you work somewhere for a while. You're making a big leap or a big jump into a new career, or maybe you're re-entering the workforce and you're trying to evaluate where your skill sets are at. So the first piece that we like to emphasize is evaluate your likes and dislikes. Just because you've worked in a role before does not mean that that is the direction that you need to go in or that you have to go in again. So look at those likes and dislikes. You want to make sure that you are comfortable with what you're doing. Think about what duties you liked, what you are good at, what duties did you not like and would not be a good fit for you in your next step. Then it's a good idea to review titles and levels of roles. So whenever you have that gap and you are re-entering, at what level are you re-entering? Do you feel comfortable coming back in at the same level as to whenever you last left off? I think for some people, the answer is yes. For some people, it's been a minute and I don't know if I'm quite yet comfortable in stepping back into that role. Or it's, you know what, I really want to try something new. But also evaluating at what level of role you are at. I know Kathy was giving a really good example whenever she was talking about customer service earlier and how there are different levels within working with and managing customers. So think about what level you are entering at, and is it a level that you're comfortable with? Think about your industry. Is this a new industry or is this the same industry? I think for a lot of people, it can be easy to want to go back into the same industry, but make sure that whenever you're going back in, that you are ready for whatever challenges have developed as that industry might have changed or progressed during your time away. We know, again, kind of going back to layoffs that have happened at a number of companies and that continue to happen. We know that these industries are continuing to change and grow. So just make sure that whenever it comes to an industry that you're familiar with that industry, if it's something that's new, and if it's something that is that you're familiar with, make sure that you know what area you're coming back in at. Whenever we talk about entering a new industry, there's a lot of different pieces that you have to think about as a job seeker. But think about where you want to be, where you are, and where you want to be. Refresh your resume. So whenever it comes to refreshing your resume, um, I recommend for folks to develop a master resume if you don't already have one. And the reason is because you have wonderful skills. Every single person on this call has absolutely wonderful skills. It's just a matter of how you showcase your skills for whatever job you're interested in, which is why we recommend a master resume. List all of the jobs that you've had, list experience that you've had, and then you might also want to think about different ways that you can tailor that experience into the job that you're looking for. So keep in mind, you have great experience, you want to apply for different roles, but make sure that it's going to be that you're applying, that your skills and experience highlight the job that you're looking for versus just the jobs you've had. You want to make sure that those pieces align as you're applying for new jobs. But develop that master resume, have everything in one spot. And then create a resume or resumes that focus on jobs and roles. So you want to make sure that whatever you're applying to is going to be tailored to that role. I know sometimes you just want to have a general resume and get it out there, which I think is also fine. Again, depending on what you're looking for, what you're applying for. But just make sure that if you have a resume, that it's something that is going to be easily visible to recruiters and something that is going to showcase your skills and abilities. Something else in regards to that too, I know whenever I talk to job seekers, I talk to job seekers that are very seasoned and developed in their respective roles, and they'll show me a resume and it'll have absolutely wonderful experience. And I will tell them that it's got wonderful experience, but keep in mind that the average recruiter, they don't have a whole lot of time to look at resumes. So make sure you highlight all of the wonderful experience that you have and make sure that it's easily digestible to recruiters. Point number 3 is review. So you want to edit, share, and get feedback. So a big piece of the job search is collaboration. Whenever I look at my resume, I think my resume looks great, but I know whenever I hand it to a friend, they're going to be able to give me feedback based on their perception. There might be something that I did not see in my resume, whether it was something grammatical, whether it was something where words just maybe fit a little bit better based on another set of eyes being able to take a gander at what you have, but utilize those folks that you have, whether they're friends, whether they're family, other colleagues, and networks as well, to review your resume because you want to make sure that you have as much feedback as possible. Keep in mind, whenever it comes to feedback, ask for constructive feedback because that's what you want at the end of the day. The more eyes that you can get on a resume, the better. Then you want to align for your audience. So whenever you think about your resume, think about the industry that you've worked in or industries if you've worked in a number of them. You want to try to eliminate as much jargon as possible and make sure to explain acronyms. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody on the phone, they'll start throwing acronyms at me and I don't know exactly what they're talking about. So I have to get some clarification. Whenever it comes to recruiters, understand that most recruiters are going to be generalist and they're going to know a lot about a lot of different things. So if you ever have questions about what you're doing as far as presenting your information, then ask. If you have an acronym that you want to use, make sure to spell it out. And then if it's something that's maybe an industry term that does not translate well, try to eliminate that or figure out some way to create a common language. I know with my resumes in the past, I had worked in higher education for quite a while, and then I had transitioned into corporate and then nonprofit sector. And some of the terms that we used were just very different. So I had to figure out what is the best way to present myself so that people understand what I'm talking about and I can showcase my skills as wonderfully as possible. And again, that goes back to translate your experience. So sometimes you will see a job description, and the job description will give you a number of pieces. And your first thought is, I have that experience. I've done that. And then you look at your resume and you're like, okay, I've done that, but I don't feel like that's reflected on my resume. Well, look at that job description and start to translate that experience into something that that recruiter is going to be able to understand. Look at specific terms and words that they use to figure out the best way to communicate with them. And again, if for some reason you're having any challenges translating that experience, it goes back to that review piece. It goes back to that support piece, and getting some additional help with translating your experience. Fill in the gaps. And I know this is the big piece that folks have questions about with regards to gaps in your resume. What do I tell recruiters? Do I say something? Do I not say something? My suggestion is, if you have gaps in your resume, it could be the elephant in the room for you. It's the thing that you are like, oh, I'm nervous about talking about this piece. It's okay to talk about gaps in your resume. Think about the world that we live in. The world that we live in has changed quite a bit. And I think COVID was one of the things that really kind of flipped a switch for people, whenever it came to more transparency with job searches and understanding that people are people. I think that job searches have always been challenging, but once we had so many things happen in our world revolving around COVID, we started to understand, yes, families are important. You are important. You need to prioritize yourself. You need to prioritize what you're doing. So having taken any time to focus on you, your family, just health in general, are really important. Again, going back to the layoff piece, we understand that layoffs happen as well. So I think if you're able to translate that experience and help to fill in those gaps, you can also talk about, what have you been doing during those gaps? Because if you have anything that is going to add to your resume or add to your skills and experience, highlight those things. If you've been taking any courses, if you've been getting any kind of certifications, even if you've been like watching videos on YouTube or watching tutorials, talk about those pieces, because those show employers that you are interested and that you're working to continue to develop yourself. And even if they're just personal pieces, my recommendation is always share what you're comfortable sharing, but try to highlight some of those pieces so that way recruiters know what is going on or what you're going through. Because at the end of the day, if you don't say something, if you don't fill in those gaps, then somebody else is going to fill in those gaps. So empower yourself to take the lead on that. Connect and create, or contact and create connections. So, whenever it comes to applying for jobs, one of the really important things, my opinion, is visit and research company websites. Go to websites for companies. A lot of the times, companies will they're going to highlight what they do, they're going to highlight jobs, really because you want to understand what that company is going to offer you as you're applying to something. Think about culture, think about fit. There's a lot of things to know. The other piece too is, I know whenever I'm talking to a lot of job seekers, folks will call us. Um, they'll call us because we pop up as a number one search on Google, which we are very proud of. We have a lot of very positive reviews, which I'll highlight in just a moment. Um, but I know whenever folks come and chat with us, what I love to tell them about Peak Performers is, one, our website is very easy to navigate. I know there's some websites that you might need a map to navigate, but with Peak, we have a few buttons on our homepage that will allow you to go and visit any of the jobs that we currently have available, and to apply for them directly. And they are just very a minimal amount of clicks that can give you a lot of information. So whenever folks call me and ask questions, one of the questions I ask is, have you visited our website? Because I would love you to check out jobs that you are attracted to, that you think are going to be a good fit. You can see the full job description. You can see everything from what they're looking for in a candidate that's going to be a good fit, to the hourly rate, to where the location is going to be, whether it's on-site, hybrid, remote, approximately where it's going to be at in the Austin metro area. You can see all of those details and you can apply directly. So whenever you go to company websites, you can do your research and see if that company is going to be a good fit for you. Reach out to recruiters. I know some of these things, I feel like it's very serendipitous because I know Kathy was talking about a number of these pieces as we were going through. So I think just kind of echoing some of those are great. But reach out to recruiters. If you go and apply, follow up with the recruiter. If you've talked to somebody, if you have a name, if you have a phone number, email address, even a text number as well, reach out to them and follow up about your candidacy. The other thing that you can do is reach out to them even proactively before you apply for a position. LinkedIn is a great resource whenever it comes to connecting with folks. You build your professional network, but recruiters are out there. I talked to who did I talk to? I talked to somebody recently and we are talking about LinkedIn and they're like, do candidates reach out to you? And I said, yes, they do all the time. Um, well, why do they reach out to me? Well, because they want to talk to somebody that works at the company because they want to get some insight. So it's okay to reach out to recruiters. And even if you've talked to somebody and a little bit of time has passed, it's okay to reach out again. If you're sitting there waiting, and wondering, oh, I wonder whenever they're going to get back to me. I wonder whenever they're going to get back to me. Just reach out to them. You don't know until you know. Like if you're waiting around for an answer and you're getting anxious, make the move, reach out. And the worst that somebody can say is, looks like you're not progressing in this role. But at the very least, you know where you're sitting at. Or they could tell you, hey, we don't have an answer yet for this role. So make sure to reach out to recruiters and follow up. Connect and expand professional networks. So glad that y'all are here with Launchpad, but think about all of the networks that you have. There are so many that are out there. It's a great idea to continue to expand your network, continue to grow. We had one of our managers on our team recently did a presentation, and she had gone to a conference with a number of other members of our team, and the presenter was talking about being uncomfortable and how you know that you're doing the right thing whenever you're feeling uncomfortable. And as you grow and get more experience, then you start to be more comfortable. So if connecting with people in networks makes you a little bit uncomfortable, continue to do that and continue to expand that network, because those are going to be the people that will be helping you to get jobs. I had a coworker. There was one point after I had gotten out of my career in higher education, I talked to one of my a coworker and a friend that I had worked with for at least 3 years and said, hey, I'm job searching. I want to get into recruiting. I don't know what to do. And she said, hey, you want to come interview with my company? And I said, yeah. And because of her, I was able to get a job interview. Networking matters. So always take advantage of networking opportunities because you never know where your next job is going to come from. Next one is consider contract work. So whenever it comes to contract work, I know that if you've had contract work before, you might have an idea of how it works. If you've never had it before, you're like, okay, well, what is contract work and why is it different? Whenever it comes to contract work, essentially what it is, it's going to be temporary work in support of an agency. So for peak performers, we have a number of different roles that are going to be on contract. So they're going to be temporary jobs where you are employed by peak performers, but you're helping to support the state of Texas and different Texas state agencies. So as you go through, you will you'll help to work with whatever that agency is, and then you can also as you go through, you get paid by that specific staffing agency. So they're going to be shorter term assignments that you get some good experience. So what you might learn during that is you'll learn a number of different things. So the benefits of it are that you learn, it's a try before you buy. That's the term I was looking for. Maybe you're not sure if you want to work for a specific agency and you go and apply. You're like, oh, I don't know if this is the best fit for me. You go and work for another agency and you're like, oh my gosh, I found my home. This is the place where I excel and I have coworkers that are really helping to propel me. Another benefit of contract work is you get in there you're working for Peak or for another staffing agency, and then you're able to get your foot in the door whenever it comes to working for the state. I know one of the benefits of working for the state is it's retirement, it's job security. I can tell you some stories that I've had with folks who went out and worked in the private sector for a little while, and they're like, you know what? I think I want to come back to work for the state because it's more security for me. So there are so many wonderful benefits whenever it comes to contract work. You get that short-term experience, get to continue to build your resume, still supported by a staffing agency, and can lead to permanent opportunities. And then whenever it comes to the peak difference, as I mentioned before, whenever it comes to peak, we're good at what we do, and I'm not going to be shy about it. Like, we love the people that we work with. Our goal is really to connect wonderful people to wonderful roles, and that's why whenever you go search Google, we will pop up usually as the number one for folks. So if if you're ever out there searching, you'll probably pop up. I think we have 4.7 out of 5 stars on Google. And we have a pretty positive reputation whenever it comes to our associates. So we have a number of folks that have worked for us that either have really enjoyed their time with us, who move on to permanent roles at the state, or you know what, they might go and end up working for us for a while, supporting the state, might move on to other roles and come back to us. But at the end of the day, we are just excited to connect wonderful people to wonderful roles. And at the end of the day, celebrate what we're doing. We also know that with other staffing agencies, they can be very competitive whenever it comes to trying to place folks. You might be working with one person and you're like, you're working with this person through the end. With us, it's collaborative. We talk about job seekers all the time because our goal, again, is to get job seekers plugged into roles that are going to be a good fit. Yes, I would definitely agree with that, Kathy. Contract work is like living with someone before marriage. Yeah, you really you get a good feel for it, and you want to make sure that, again, it's going to be a good fit for you. The next piece, seek out support and resources. So there's really 3 big pieces to this. So I know Peak has been marketing this piece. The program we've been marketing just kind of recently rolled out. It's called My First Office Job, and we've been doing it in collaboration with a number of entities. So with this program specifically, there are 3 parts to it. So the first part that we like to emphasize for folks that are coming to chat with us is get services. Whenever anyone comes and talks to us, sometimes they are job ready and they're ready to go, and they come to us. They know exactly what they want. They know that we have it, and they're really here for us to connect them to it. Other times we know that, you know what, maybe you have experience in one area, but you are looking for experience in another area. So you're working on building that out. So really with the Get Services is the first piece. That's working with the workforce centers and workforce solutions really around Central Austin and kind of the metro area. The workforce centers have folks there that can help you with resumes. They can help you with general support pieces getting started on a search, whether it's your first search or whether you've job searched before. If you need that additional support, they have computers. They have a lot of great resources. The second piece is get trained. So let's say that you're working in one area, you want to get experience in another area. Get trained allows access to metrics training. So metrics training is going to be, I think, very similar to the skills build with IBM. With the metrics training, I actually just went in and created my profile yesterday, and you can go in and start getting experience in different areas. So if you're looking at wanting to become a purchaser, or if you want to get a role in cybersecurity, it allows you to take courses. There are assessments in there as well. You do a general assessment at the beginning, and you can start taking all of these trainings in order to get a larger breadth of experience. And what Miles put is 100% right. Yes, all of these resources are free, so definitely take advantage of it. We have information that talks about how to go through, how to get connected to all of those wonderful trainings. There's a tutorial video I know that I was watching yesterday and trying to get connected to everything with metrics trainings, but just a great way to get some additional resources. There are also badges that you can get to where you can add them on LinkedIn. You can add them on resumes as well to showcase that you're working on developing those skills and that you are at a specific level of comfortability and knowledge with those trainings. Um, I don't really need to talk about get connected with Launchpad because y'all are here. I know whenever it comes to resources, you all are Launchpad is an absolutely phenomenal resource for support, and support is a big piece, as you all know, with the job search. Whenever it comes to support networks and support systems, you need to have them in order to be successful because the job search is challenging. The job search is a job in and of itself. So by being here, by being present, and by being connected, you're able to get so many wonderful resources in order to be successful as a part of your job search. And the final bullet point is maintain momentum. I think momentum is the hardest piece whenever it comes to the job search. It's so easy to get discouraged. So easy. I know times whenever I wasn't employed and I was trying to figure out what to do, once you start getting rejection letters or don't get rejections or hear anything, it starts to create, I think, doubt in us. So whenever it comes to maintaining momentum, one of the first pieces that you can do, it refers back to what we talked about earlier. Follow up with employers, talk to recruiters, figure out where folks are at with their searches. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. I know that there have been times at places that I've worked at where we had a job we were hiring for, but then everything got put on pause for that specific job for one reason or another. And whenever it comes to updates, if you don't know that as a job seeker, it's going to create some level of stress. So follow up with employers and don't be afraid to follow up. Employers always understand that if you're a job seeker, that you're going to be reaching out. Stay motivated. So whenever it comes to staying motivated, celebrate wins. So there are so many things that you can celebrate. I think whenever it comes to staying motivated, it's all about attitude and your outlook. Um, whenever you go and apply for a job, celebrate that. Whenever whenever you're making steps to progress through the job search process, make sure to celebrate those wins. Because those are the things that can help to keep you motivated. Even if you just got up and you're like, okay, I don't want to go through my entire resume, but I want to work on, 3 bullet points for this role, or I want to, maybe change this part of my resume, or I want to go into LinkedIn and update my LinkedIn profile, or Indeed or ZipRecruiter or wherever you might be making updates. But continue to do those things and celebrate those little wins in order to help you stay motivated. Because the job search process, as we all know, can be very draining. So turn it into bite-sized pieces and celebrate those wins as you have them. Build a support network. So whenever it comes to support networks, the first person that comes into my head is one of my best friends, who is an absolutely wonderful person, but who has been struggling quite a bit whenever it comes to current employment. Whenever it comes to employment, my friend always says to me, "Oh, I need to go work on my resume. Oh, I'm gonna, I want to leave this job," or "Oh, I need a change. I need to do this." And I think it's always good whenever you have a support network to let you know, if you are the job seeker, tell your support network how you need to be supported. I think about conversations that I have with some of the people that are closest to me in my life, and I will ask them, do you want me to listen to you, or do you want me to give you suggestions? And that will dictate that conversation. So whenever we talk about having those conversations, for my friend that I'm using in this example, I'm like, I love you to death, but you need to take action. Like, you can talk about planning, but execution is what's going to get you there. So as a friend, how can I support you? So as you build your support network and as you expand your support network, who do you have in it? Do you have family? Do you have friends? Do you have colleagues, former coworkers? Thinking about people that know you very well. Because at the end of the day, those are the people that are going to help to motivate you in the ways that you need motivation, whether it's to be someone that is going to be supportive, or whether it's somebody who's going to inspire you to do what you need to in order to be successful. And that wraps up all of the big pieces. I know yeah, Shannon, you're 100% right. Whenever it comes to rejection, it's you have to think about, the jobs that you've applied to. We know that it can hurt. You can have your sights set on one job, and that's what's always kind of difficult. Is you have that one job that you're like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect job, and then things don't work out. So it's keeping that motivation in order to make sure that you're good. And
I have a question too. Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry. Was somebody else going to talk?
jump on in with any questions.
Thank you for posting the list again. I was going to ask you if you could go back to that. I want to say, number one, I love your PowerPoint presentation or whatever you've used for that. I love the graphics and the way it's all lined up. Kudos to you for really knowing how to make a terrific visual presentation. I love it. So the topic is covering the gaps, and so that's just one little piece of this very comprehensive presentation. Do you recommend putting something like personal sabbatical, family sabbatical, something like that, to say during this period of time, this is what I did, and then, or how would you recommend people cover that? That, how do you title that piece? And then if you title it a certain way, then do you think that they need to explain more of that? Do they need to go into any more detail? Do they need to try to explain what they did in terms of like managed a household, or was in charge of budget or whatever? One person that I heard speak at a conference took off 8 years. I think she had worked at Dell before that and took off 8 years. It might even have been longer than that, to care for children. And what she put underneath was all of the leadership roles she'd had: president of the PTA, and I don't even know, director of the cookie drive or something like that. Or do you just not go into detail? You just say, yeah, this was a personal time and now I'm back into the fray. What's your advice?
I think it really depends on level of comfortability with the individual. I think whatever I would say first off, whatever you put down, you need to be comfortable talking about. So if it is a piece like your example, Kathy, where somebody was involved with leadership roles, I think that those are great things to put down. Anything that can highlight some information to help fill in those gaps. I think it's also good to try to be proactive in even reaching out to recruiters to try to have that conversation to also help fill in those gaps. Because if it's something that somebody's not 100% confident about putting on their resume, to where there could be some potential uncertainty with a recruiter, I think having that conversation via the phone, via an email, via reaching out on LinkedIn or another platform can really help once they have that conversation for somebody to understand. But I think it can be good to highlight that experience in a way that showcases things that have been accomplished during that time. And if it's something where an individual doesn't necessarily feel like, they're like, I don't feel a sense of accomplishment in what I've done, but I want to talk about, that I was focusing on my family. I was focusing sabbatical, like I was taking a sabbatical to focus on family, or for personal reasons, I think that's also fair to put on there. At the end of the day, again, to me, I think it all comes back to having conversations with recruiters, with sourcers, with people kind of within the talent realm in order to talk about some of those gaps.
Now, here's another one. If your gap was because of a serious illness that you had, not that a family member had, but that you had, that you don't want and shouldn't have to disclose to a potential employer, do you, I know what I advise people to do, but I'd like to hear, of course, peak is a different situation because having an illness, it can be an advantage with peak, but in lots of companies, if you have had a serious illness like cancer, some companies look at you as a potential risk of recurrence, and so they don't want to hire you. What is your advice about that kind of a gap?
If it's that type of a gap, again, depending on the company that someone is applying to, I think it can be all right to be a little bit more vague as to why that gap exists. I think that there are always pieces that you can talk about whenever it comes to experience. So focus. I think it would be better to probably leave that just a little more vague for those companies, especially if anyone is concerned. And then whenever it comes to actually chatting about it, talk about how there are just more personal pieces behind that, but then still focusing on the experience and how their past experience has prepared them for their next steps.
Okay. I had a client, this is somewhat related. I had a client who late in life, she'd had a really great career, and then her husband died, and it threw her into such an emotional tailspin that she started to drink and developed a drinking problem. And so she left her job, and for at least a year, maybe longer, she checked herself into a facility and she worked on getting sober, and certainly didn't want to go into that. And so what she ended up doing, which worked really well for her, is she would say, I found myself in a position where I didn't have to work. And so I took that opportunity to do some things I'd always wanted to do. So I traveled and I took care of, spending time with family and just doing things that I'd always wanted to do that I hadn't had the opportunity. But now I'm ready to get back into the fray and resume my career. And so nobody's going to ask more about that. Did you come into some money? It's none of your business about how, but when you say, here, I didn't have to work, I took this opportunity and I just did some things that were fun, and didn't talk ever about that personal tragedy.
Yeah, I think that's great. To me, it takes me kind of back to that COVID pivot, which is, it's focusing on yourself, it's focusing on your experience. I had the talking about opportunities that one had, I think are great, to where you can have that spin to where it doesn't necessarily leave you vulnerable whenever you're interviewing or you're putting your resume out there, but still doesn't lead to questions by employers that could make somebody feel uncomfortable.
Right. And lots of times employers ask inappropriate questions, trying to get the details that you shouldn't have to disclose.
Yeah.
And Martha has said, how long do you consider a gap? One of the things that Catherine Jewell had mentioned one time is that the average length of time a person spends on a job search these days is 7.2 months. So in the past, that's considered rather a serious gap for a job hunter. How long do you consider a gap that has to be addressed on a resume?
I honestly think if there's any length of time, I think that those could be considered gaps. But I think whenever it comes, like in my mind, a gap could be a month, a gap could be 2 months, a gap could be, 7 months. So I think it's really just a matter of how you present that information whenever it comes to moving really from job to job, or if you had a job and then you had that longer kind of personal gap, it's just a matter of presenting that information again as far as what did you do during that time, putting that spin on that gap to make sure that you look good in the employer's eyes, but that you also feel comfortable talking about that piece. I think that's the other piece with the gap is just level of comfortability.
So you said any length of time. So if it took you 2 months to find a job, you think on a resume somebody should put job search?
I don't think that you necessarily have to put job search, but I think just talking about that, because there's some jobs where, because an employer could ask, I see that it looks like there was a little bit of time in between these two jobs. Like, how did you end your last job? Was it something to where it was a contract job that wrapped up? Was it a job where you decided to leave? If you decided to leave, what was your reason for leaving that job? I think whenever it comes to gaps, there are times when some employers might dig a little bit deeper than others, but just be ready to answer that. I don't think that that's necessarily, especially if it's a couple of months, something that needs to be put on a resume, but just be ready to talk about it, because employers will always have questions. Because at the end of the day, I know at least for us at Peak, we're just always curious as to where people are. We want to make sure that we have an understanding of what experience looks like, so that way we can set folks up for success in their next job.
Okay, and related, if a person has worked a number of contract jobs, are you okay with lumping them all together and saying, for example, job title contractor, and then say something like worked for a variety of a variety of staffing companies or whatever, performing these job duties, these responsibilities in these industries or something like that, and lumping those all together, even though in reality, it could be that there was a gap, a few months in between each contract job, but putting them all together on a resume. Is that something that you think is okay?
I think it can be okay. I know in my conversations with candidates, I usually try to dig a little bit deeper. So if they say, "Hey, I worked for this staffing agency for X amount of years," I ask a little bit more information about the types of roles that they worked. I see that you worked in customer service. I see that you worked in data entry. Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience? What was the length of your individual contracts, just to kind of get some clarity as to, that entire time that they put on there, were they employed that entire time, or was there any additional breaks, just to get an idea of like consistent employment. And really, whenever I ask those types of questions, it's to the candidate's benefit, because I know as a sourcer, I present candidates to recruiters, and I know recruiters do the same thing whenever it comes to candidates progressing. So I want to be able to accurately reflect how long somebody has experience in, a respective area, whether they're an admin and they're in customer service, a tech role, what have you. I want to be able to be like, this person has been, they have, 5+ years working in fill in the blank. So I know for me, I want to make sure that you're successful. This is how I'm going to set this up. So I might ask and dig just a little bit deeper.
Okay. And Catherine Jewell has a question for you. Catherine?
Yeah, well, actually, it was a comment. One of the ways to avoid gaps is to use year to year. And so that erases a lot of the few months in between when you're looking. And so I consider a gap any more than a year, but I think Evan's making a very important point, and that is that recruiters will ask you over and over, why did you leave this job? Sometimes they'll ask, how did you get the next job? And so you should have an answer for every single one of those items on your resume, and it should be short. Shorter the better. How did you lose this job? We had a layoff. Period. End of story. And, so you've got to have a really short and concise answer that's not emotionally charged. That's the most important part. But the other thing I wanted to mention is one time I had a client who was schizophrenic, and he had a major schizophrenic breakdown. And what happened was he was a software developer, And so what he did was he stepped back and did a part-time job in just like internet administration, basically networking administration. And while he did that, he did a lot of training, which goes to your point, Kathy, about get some training when you're, kind of between. And he studied Salesforce to the point that he was able to get a wonderful job in Salesforce.com. But his gap with just part-time work was about 3 years. And what he would say in an interview is, I had a major health issue and I was unable to work full-time during that time. But here's what I did. Here's what I studied. And it worked. It worked great.
Thank you, Catherine. Those are good points. I do want to mention one thing that we learned about putting year to year. For a long time, all resume people said this is a great way to cover up your gaps. And if you're sending a resume to a technical recruiter or an individual or a small company, that works really well. We learned that applicant tracking systems, however, most of them will, if you put year to year, they'll default that to January 1 of that year. So one of our people, in fact, this guy had month year to month year. And I said, oh, you have that little gap. If you put year to year, it'll cover that up. So he changed it all to year to year. This was in August. And he went for an interview and the company said, well, you've been unemployed quite a long time. And he said, they said, what have you done that's constructive since you were last employed? He said, oh, no, I've only been unemployed a couple of weeks. I lost my job in July. And they said, well, on our form, it says January 1st of the year.
Oh.
So it was like, uh-oh. So he went back to putting the month. And even if you just put month, it'll default to day 1 of that month, but that's probably fine. But anyway, yeah, the applicant tracking system screwed us up on that great idea.
Well, thanks for that information. That's helpful to me as a resume writer.
And Catherine, oh, sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Evan.
I was going to say, Catherine, with the example that you had with the job seeker that you were working with that had a breakdown too, like in my mind, if somebody didn't want to disclose that, it's almost, you know what, I decided to take a step back and reevaluate my career. And after I was doing some, searching in the job market, I found that Salesforce would be really beneficial for my next step. So I decided to work part-time and just kind of looking at avenues. I think it's fantastic that that job seeker was able to be transparent. But I think, and that's why I'm really enjoying this presentation and chatting this out, is I think that there's so many wonderful ways to collaborate to make sure that folks are successful. And that's why I think support networks are especially a big piece whenever you talk about how to present that information and how to present any kinds of gaps or any transitions that are going to be potentially challenging for job seekers.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's another way to deal with that is to say, I chose during that period of time, I chose to have a little better work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And so that just people are just going to assume you've got children. And so, or something like that. And so you're working part-time, you got your talents in the game and so forth. But you're relying more on, you're spending a little bit more time with your family. So if it's your decision and you can spin it as to that positive thing, it's none of their business if anything is going on with you addiction wise. Right now I'm working with a young man who is trying to be in recovery. And he will get a crappy job and then he'll relapse. And then, so he's got a spotty work history with these gaps when he goes back into rehab. Then he comes out and he's trying to resume a normal life. And the people that have to deal with those kinds of challenges, you have to decide how much of this, if I disclose that I keep going back into rehab, nobody's going to hire him. And he's, do I fess up and explain what's going on or not? Those kinds of challenges, you probably need to to get some advice from somebody that's going to help you figure out. You want to tell the truth, but you don't have to tell all the truth, the detailed truth, but you don't ever want to lie.
And going back to Catherine's first point, and echoing what you're saying, Kathy, is yeah, just be short, be brief. You don't have to. The more you talk, the more things can come out that you don't want to come out. So just make sure that if you're explaining, just rehearse, know what you're going to say, and be comfortable and confident with what you're saying. And I think that that's absolutely wonderful.
We have another question where Georgia said, what are the things that employers are afraid that a gap is an indicator of? And he is coming from a perspective of he retired. And I think if I remember correctly, he's been retired for 3 years and now he's coming back into the workplace. So Evan, you want to address that?
Yeah, well, first of all, welcome back to the workplace, George. I know, at least from the perspective of peak performers, we absolutely love anyone that's retired. Just because we know that retirees have great experience and they're going to add a lot to whatever role they step into. You have this wealth of knowledge, this wealth of experience. You have a way that you've worked. So we love retirees. But whenever it comes to most jobs, I think especially as a retiree, if you have a gap in really from whenever you retired to whenever you come in, I think just letting folks know, hey, I retired, and you know what? This is my next round of. I want to have either a new career or I want to step back into the workforce. And I think I know for a number of folks that I've seen, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether I've seen resumes come in, you can list that you've been retired and that you're re-entering the workforce. And I think that's wonderful. Just to present yourself that way.
And again, I think if you say that it's your choice, I had an opportunity to take an early retirement option or something like that, where it's like you had plenty more years that you could have worked effectively, but man, this opportunity came your way and you couldn't turn it down. So you had an opportunity to take an early retirement option. And that was fun, but you didn't want to stay on the golf course for the next 20 years. I want to use my skills and be productive. So I'm back in. I can't wait. And it's also very effective if you're able to say, I took this refresher course or I got this certification. Lots of times people will say, your skills are rusty. Being a coder is not like riding a bike. You can't just jump right back in and be as agile as you were before. So what have you done to really refresh your skills? So it's good if you have something that you can say, even as Evan said, if it's a LinkedIn course or it's an online course, Coursera or Udemy or one of those. Anyway, I think all of that's helpful. I hope that answered your question, George. If I didn't do it right, then let us know.
Kathy?
Yeah, John.
Yeah, this is John. I think we might want to be mindful a little bit of when these questions about gaps started to become very popular for employers and recruiters to ask. And that was, as I best remember it, that was around the Great Recession when it was an employer's market and employers were complaining that they had hundreds or thousands of resumes to get through. And so it was one more way to knock people out. Oh, he's got a gap, so we'll knock those out, so that they had a manageable amount of candidates. The market has changed dramatically, as I'm sure Evan would agree. So, it's not really I think employers are used to asking that, but I'm not sure they anymore have a really good reason to do it. Because what you hear from employers is they're complaining they can't get enough good candidates. So, knocking people out on just the basis of, oh, you had a gap, and I got a guy who doesn't have a gap, I think in many cases or most cases is illegitimate. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
good point, John.
Yeah, that's a very good point, John. And I would say, at least from the perspective that I have, a lot more of it just kind of comes from general curiosity to understand really where folks are at, and kind of what's been going on with their respective career. at least from my experience, I haven't seen it as a negative or a reason to try to knock someone out. It's more really just to kind of understand where folks are at, if folks have been building skills, if there was something that was more of an extenuating circumstance, but less of a we want to disqualify candidates.
Well,
but again,
my point was that's where I think where it came from.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
it became something that everybody just looks for and asks about.
Yeah.
I would
definitely
go ahead.
Oh yeah, you go ahead.
I would go further than just it came from there. I would say take your gap and try and turn it into a strength. So if you get a recruiter like Evan, who just kind of wants to know your story, that's the reason to sit down, think through your gap, write it up as a star story, and then practice it so that you don't miss a beat when somebody asks about it. Oh, I was developing more skills, and or I was rehabbing from a little health condition or whatever. But turn it into a strength is what I would actually encourage everybody to think about.
I also wanted to point out there is it falls under a number of different names, but the biggest program is called iRelaunch, and it's a program. That particular program is for women, and it is for women who normally it's anybody who's taken off 3 years to care for someone, and they have to have had a certain kind of career before that. Then they took a break from the career. They cared for somebody. Now they're trying to get back to work. And there are companies, you can go into irelaunch.com. I put it in the chat. And that's the big national program. They will, different companies will create their own unique relaunch program where they will hire women who qualify in that way and hire them at a good salary, put them through a boot camp to bring them up to speed and in their software or their technical skills or whatever, work them for maybe 6 months, 9 months. And then of that group of people that are working for the company, they'll offer permanent employment to the top 1 or 2 people. In Austin, IBM has a program like that. That is, they're looking for engineers, I believe. It can be male or female. It can be, I think it's a 2-year gap. It can for any purpose. So it can even be a 2-year gap while you're looking for work. And it's not an ongoing program. They launch it a couple times a year, where they will give people an opportunity to come back after that kind of a gap. PayPal has a program like that, and Return Path. No, it's not Return Path. I'm so sorry, I forgot. There are other companies, but sometimes they call it something different from Relaunch. I'll try to do some more research because my memory is failing me in this as to what they're called in different companies. But whatever, if you tap into the iRelaunch website and become a follower of that so that you get the postings of that. I just got one today that said that Deloitte has a huge program for people returning to the workforce after such a gap. So that might be something where the gap works in your favor. Oh, thank you, Sherry. New collar at IBM or return to work program. Return to work program, I think, is what I'd never heard of new collar, but I think return to work is one of them. So thank you very much for that. I'm done.
Did anyone have any other questions or comments or thoughts?
Feel free to just unmute and ask your question or put your hand up or in the chat, either one. All right. Evan didn't say this, but we were a dress rehearsal. He's going to make this maybe pieces of this, if not the whole thing, at the April 12th career fair, City of Austin career fair.
Yeah.
So at any rate, we're excited about that. I think I've given you 5 stars on your presentation.
Thank you.
I think you're gonna be a big hit.
Yeah, definitely. And make sure if you all haven't signed up, the City of Austin Career Expo, it's happening on April 12th. It's going to be at the Palmer Event Center. It is a very large, very large career expo. There's going to be a number of employers there, so plenty of folks to talk to network with. They will also be doing presentations. So I'll be giving this presentation in conjunction with a number of other folks that will be presenting. They have a stage kind of off to the side, but a great way to get your name out there, to get connected. Not too far away. It's just down the road a few weeks from now. But definitely come out. I know if you go and search that event, I believe parking is going to be free, but they list everything. So definitely come on out. And if you do come out, feel free to come say hi to me, say hi to Miles, because Miles will be there as well as some additional members of our team. We would love to see y'all come out and say hi.
Good advice. And I thank all of you who put comments, related comments in the chat. Martha said that LinkedIn now has an avatar that will help you figure, they'll make suggestions as to how you fill in the gaps. I had no idea about that. I can't wait to check it out myself. And there have been all kinds of additional articles, contact information, supplemental information. Yay, I'm going to save this chat for sure. And thank you so much, Evan. It was definitely helpful, and we hardly ever get this much interaction with our speakers. It's kind of just a talking head, and this was great that so many people got involved with it. Lots of kudos and thank yous for the topic and for your presentation. So break a leg on the 12th. I think you'll be great.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Kathy, Shannon, rest of the team, everybody that is a part of Launchpad, for you all giving me such a warm welcome. I appreciate all the positive comments and to be invited into this space, because I know as somebody that works at Peak, I want to be a better resource for job seekers. So now that I have experienced the Launchpad experience, I can be an advocate, an even bigger advocate as we partner and move forward. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Evan. I do want to point out one more thing about the Peak Performers site. I put it in the chat, but I wanted to mention it as well. They do give priority in their referrals to anybody who has a disability or a condition that is covered under the ADA, but it is such a broad definition of qualifying conditions. So there are lots of you may think, I don't have one, I'm not disabled, but some allergies, and who doesn't have allergies, who lives in Austin, Texas? So I believe that that's one of the qualifying ones. Maybe it has to do with the severity of allergies, I don't know, but that's one. Sleep apnea is one, and many people suffer from that these days. And so there are all kinds of things that you may not think would qualify you, because you've just gotten used to living with whatever it is, and yet it would qualify you to get on the top of the referral heap with regard to Peak Performers. They have some fabulous jobs, lots with the state, some with the federal government, and they are expanding to where they also have jobs in other states, and they have jobs with the non-governmental sector, the private industry sector. So you should look at their job postings, which are very transparent. They'll tell you how long they're going to last, whether they're remote, hybrid, about to be live. They give salaries on their jobs. Their website is just my favorite of all time in terms of the job postings. And another thing, do not be offended when they do what no employers should ever do. They're going to ask you about your disability. They're going to say, do you have any disabilities? Do you have any conditions? And normally employers are not allowed to ask that. And answering yes to that question will be a boost with this company. If another company where this is not their nonprofit mission asked you those kinds of questions, run from that company, because they're not supposed to ask you that. It's inappropriate and illegal, and in violation of the ADA, but Peak is unique. So don't be offended if they ask you about those sorts of things. And then if they can't find a qualified person, and Evan, correct me if I'm wrong on this, if they can't find a qualified person for the job who has some sort of a disability, then they tap into their resume pool. And so even if you don't have a condition, send your resume, put your resume in their resume pool, and that still doesn't eliminate you from consideration for one of their jobs.
That is correct. And thank you so much for that plug, Kathy. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we consider everybody that applies for us. It's just that if anybody has any disabilities or any long-term or chronic medical conditions, they're our priority candidates. So whenever I talk to somebody on the phone and they disclose a disability, which they do not have to at that time, I'm always like, well, I'm excited. I know this sounds kind of awkward, but you're a priority candidate with us. And whenever it comes to that disability conversation too, please know that whenever you're talking to any member of our team, we usually just ask a couple of questions whenever it comes to disability. It's not at the forefront of everything that we do, because at the end of the day, all of our job seekers are job seekers, and we want to make sure that we're asking you the right questions to see if it's a fit. It's just a matter of a statement that we have that talks about disability. Do you agree? Yes or no? And then whenever it comes to working with any state agencies, we don't disclose those disabilities because you're a staff member working for Peak. We don't have to disclose those disabilities. It's only a matter of accommodations, if accommodations are needed. So if you're a job seeker who's been out there before and you're like, I have a disability or a chronic medical condition, you don't have to be afraid with us. And if you talk to our staff, we are usually pretty transparent about any disabilities or chronic medical conditions that we have that qualify us for it. I have hypertension. I'm very transparent about that. I take medication daily for that. So if you are curious about that, definitely check out our website. Always feel free to follow up with us. But for anything, especially that you are taking medication for that is going to be long-term, you are typically going to be qualified for that.